Seasons change.
Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Betsy.
And we host a podcast called Going on 30.
Each month, Greg and I discuss movies that were nominated or should have been nominated for Best Picture 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely a risky business, but we'd be losing it if we didn't discuss the legend of Oscar caliber movies.
That's a little dramatic, but sure. We give our takes on one movie each month, debate its lasting legacy, and talk about its place in cinema history.
You know, Betsy, in these days of thunder, when far and away a few good men are going through life with their eyes wide shut to the firm hold that the color of money has over the film industry, it's just a night and day difference between the beautiful magnolia of the top guns of the business and the oblivion of the edge of tomorrow of American-made franchise.
Okay, all right. I think I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm having a cocktail while I give you my Minority Report on the War of the Worlds.
Stop it. You are listing just Tom Cruise movies. I'm done.
That is just Mission Impossible. Ghost Protocol.
Okay, so listen to Going on 30 whenever you get the Poppy College feed.
Jerry Maguire, the Mummy. Jack Reacher, the Vanilla Sky Rain Man.
God, you have a deep, deep problem, my friend.
How to introduce this, so I'll just say hi. My name is Greg Knight.
Hey, I'm Ryan Parker.
And this is a new series that we're starting. We're not talking TV anymore, Ryan. We've left TV behind.
Are you telling me, are we getting off the couch?
That's right. That's right. It's time to get off the couch.
Literally and metaphorically.
And go into the world. We're starting a new series that I'm tentatively calling PC Pilgrims. We'll see where it goes. It may just be, we may call it go 2 by 2 or something. I don't know. But this is a series where Ryan and I are going to be starting a research project where we explore the role that spiritual pilgrimage, specifically hiking pilgrimage, plays in religions around the world. We just kind of started this idea like a few months ago. And so you're going to be able to follow us on how we organize this, how we get funding for this, what our trips are, what we're researching, all that stuff. So you're kind of coming along with us.
We're kind of building the plane while we're taking off. We're not even flying. We're like trying to get off the runway.
That's right.
You know, there's something I think different about this type of conversation and project, because you're exactly right. I mean, before we started recording, we're talking about where the heck we're going to get money to do this. And, you know, there's grant money, there's hopefully donations. But I think for me, it's, where did this idea come from? What does this mean to you?
Awesome. I think that's a great place to start. Well, let's start by going into like our personal pilgrimage origin stories. And I guess mine, you know, it's probably a boring one because it's probably the same that a lot of people had. My first introduction to the concept of pilgrimage and what it actually looks like came from the movie The Way, directed by Emilio Estevez, starring his father, Martin Sheen.
You should fly with me.
Yeah, right.
Turn the car around, pack a bag, grab your passport, forget your golf clubs. Come on, a father-son trip. It'll be fun.
When you coming back?
I don't know.
So you don't have a plan?
We agreed that if I let you take me to the airport, you wouldn't lecture me about how I'm ruining my life.
I lied. You know, most people don't have the luxury of just picking up and leaving it all behind, Daniel.
Well, I'm not most people. If I don't have your blessing, that's fine. But don't judge this. Don't judge me.
My life here might not seem like much to you, but it's the life I choose.
You don't choose a life, Dad. You live one.
I don't know how I came across that movie. It just kind of like showed up in my Netflix feed, I think, and it looked interesting, and so I just kind of fired it up. That's a dramatic sort of telling of a father who's lost his son and is hiking the Camino, because that's what his son was planning to do when he died, or had started to do when he died. And there was something about this idea of like just going on a giant walk and leaving your life behind, or at least putting it on hold for a little while, and just sort of taking a respite from everything that you know and living like in a different world where you're just surrounded by people who also have questions, who are also sort of putting their lives on hold and holding that space together, just sort of being able to be strangers together who ultimately become something way more than just friends. And I thought that was an amazing concept, and I had just always been intrigued by the idea of pilgrimage going forward. So, what about you? What was it? What was the first thing that you saw that made you think of pilgrimage as a thing?
I think it's similar. I mean, obviously, having been in seminary, this is something that you talk about in church history. So for people who are listening to this that don't know, a pilgrimage is a journey. I'm reading the AI definition. To a sacred place for religious devotion or spiritual exploration. I mean, this is probably the most famous is, the Camino de Santiago, which is what is featured in The Way, just to give people some context. And it was a pilgrimage that has been walked traditionally around 500 miles from the southwest of France over into Spain and across Spain to venerate, pay homage to, visit the tomb of St. James. And people of all faiths or none at all have been doing this for, thousands of years. Yeah. But there are pilgrimages across all faiths have pilgrimages there in countries around the world. So, kind of the academic knowledge of that and that history, encountering in seminary. And then I think for you, when mine is similar to yours, when I thought, oh, this would be a thing to do, is having seen The Way also, and not quite being sure how that came on the radar. I actually think it was probably a Blockbuster DVD rental, maybe. And then, in the work that I do on the film side, we did PR work for a film called I'll Push You, which is another powerful, and I think one of the more interesting and better pilgrimage films. There's not a ton of pilgrimage films out there. So, but this one's particularly moving, about two friends who walk the Camino. Well, one walks and pushes his friend in a wheelchair, and the entire 500 miles.
Well, I wasn't really looking for the Camino. It kind of found me. I was watching PBS, and on came Rick Steves, and he was doing a thing on Spain. And then he was talking about the Camino, and I was like, what's that? I'd never heard of it at all. Later, I turned to my wife and I just said, man, that'd be something that would be crazy to do. I wonder if I could do that in my wheelchair. My immediate thought was, like, Pat and I should do this together.
We were sitting in his living room, and he asked me, you want to go across 500 miles in northern Spain with me? And I said, no, I'll push you.
And I think it was at that moment, that's when my wife and I were like, oh, that would be a thing to do. And this is probably a good transition for us to talk about our first pilgrimages. I mean, I have definitions of pilgrimage that I take that aren't traditional. I think we can talk more about that in a minute. But, that really led us to our first pilgrimage in 2018. We walked the Camino, all 500 miles. And this was after a particularly tough season of life. My father had died in April of 18 and had been living with cancer for about 3 years, during most of that time, Amy was also in a master's program at UCLA and working a full-time job. Life was just a lot.
Yeah.
And we knew that when she finished the program, she was also going to quit the job that she was at to take on a new job in light of the new degree. So we said, well, what if we just press pause, like you said? The work that I did, I pressed pause, and we walked the Camino. We started the day after my birthday, and that would have been August 30th, and we finished I think October 10th, maybe. And so that was our first, and it won't be the last, but that was our first one. What about you?
Yeah, I think that it's hard for me to talk about pilgrimage experience and divorce it from my work, because my first
You're lucky.
experience was a youth trip. So I was leading like a group of high schoolers. So the origin story of that is that, I just started working at an Episcopal church down here in South Florida. They had no youth really that were attending, like no like high school students that were attending. And so I remember I had like a handful of kids who were sort of tangentially connected to the church. And I asked them, like, what can we do that if we started it as a class or a project or whatever, you would actually show up every week so that I could show the older members of our church that we actually have teenagers that come here. And I think it was the same thing. I think they had recently watched the movie The Way. Like, it was like, I think for Americans, like, that's a big touchstone point for people who find their way to pilgrimage.
It is.
And so they had just watched the movie and they were like, well, could we do that? And I was like, well, we can't walk for a month. Like, that's not something that we can do, but we could do like a week, we could do like 5 or 6 days of walking. Let's figure out how we're going to do it. And it became this, sort of year-long project that they worked on together, and they raised the money to go on the trip. They did the research of like what all they were going to need, how much to pack, what were the places where we were going to stop along the way, like what were the hiking stages and stuff like that. And it was the summer of 2015. We went out and we did the last 100 kilometers of the Camino Frances, which is sort of the popular route of the Camino de Santiago. And I remember the first day was pretty difficult. Like, it was an eye-opener as far as like how much walking it actually was. And we started day 2. We were leaving Puerto Marin, and for anyone who's ever done the Camino, you know that Puerto Marin is in this sort of valley where this river is, and you have to climb up a hill to leave town. Like, you've got to climb to at the very beginning of the day. And one of our girls got about halfway up that hill to start the day, and she just dropped to the ground and was like, I can't do this anymore. She just stopped. Just right in the middle of the trail, and she was crying, and the whole time what I was thinking in my head was, oh my God, I've brought like a group of kids halfway around the world, and we made it to day 2 and we're not making it any further, and now I got to figure out how to get them all back home, and how we're going to pull the ripcord on the parachute to get us out of here, and all this stuff. And at some point she just found the strength to get back up and like just put one foot in front of the other, just keep going. And by the time we made it to Santiago, I mean, it was like, it wasn't even that big of a deal. Like, when you think about it in the whole grand scheme of things, we did 100 kilometers, which at the end of the day isn't really that much when you're talking about pilgrimage. But for us, it felt like we conquered something. And I mean, like, not a dry eye, like, just the whole team was just like so proud of themselves. And I realized that there's something here. There's something of value here about, 1, challenging your body and spirit, 2, overcoming doubt and all of the things that are in your brain that tell you can't do it. And then 3, the feeling of accomplishment when you arrive at your destination with your squad, like whatever that is. Like, that, there's something really profound about those things,
especially for an age group that no longer has what we as a species had for millennia, which are these kind of like rituals,
Mhm.
right? These kind of those threshold moments, right? Where, especially for young boys, where you go out into the wild and survive and then return to the community, those kinds of things. Those coming of age rituals, which we don't really have, that are the physical aspect of it. And then also, I've heard you talk about this before, about kind of detaching yourself from technology and being in the world and being around strangers. It's really interesting that you bring up the story of the young woman who was having a fit. Within the first week of our journey, maybe on the third or fourth day, that happened to Amy. And she was crying, and I can't do this, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like you, sat there, well, how do I get her home? Because I'm not going. Right? I'm going to finish this thing. And what is that going to do to our marriage? And but she got up the next morning, and as we joke, she put on her big girl pants, put the boots back on, and one foot in front of the other. And, we walked and talked to her, and she said, I knew that was going to happen. And I thought, I wish you would have given me a heads up, because I spent the whole night laying in bed, freaking out about schedule and flights and all this stuff. But she did it. We did it. And it was the exact same feeling of, and how your body can adjust and readjust. And you think, I can't walk another kilometer. And then you wake up the next morning and you do it again. And nothing that a good meal and a glass of wine won't cure. So anyway, it's really interesting that you had that experience. But those things that you talk about, which are profoundly spiritual, they're not necessarily religious, but they're profoundly spiritual because they're deeply human, of a goal of the day-to-day, one foot in front of the other, and then that sense of accomplishment. I've never experienced anything quite like those final few steps to the cathedral. And just, I mean, words can't describe that feeling of, wow, we did this. And we were walking in a path that has been trod by countless people across time, which is, there's not a lot in our day-to-day lives that we do that, that it has that kind of ritualistic, deep history. I don't know. It's, if you can do it, you should do it.
There's things that we say we do that are supposed to be that for us, right? Like church attendance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like, you know the same numbers that I do, which is that the number of people that say that they attend church services or any religious services on a regular basis has been trending down for the last 25 years. And actually before that, right? And yet the number of people that have been going on these pilgrimage trips has been trending up every year, like exponentially up.
Yeah, and that's why I think this project is so important and has value for conversations about faith, spirituality, religious, non-religious, because while the history of pilgrimages may be deeply religious with the capital R, or spiritual with the capital S, if you will, those numbers that are the participants and the folks that are making those numbers trend up are not capital R or capital S for the most part. In fact, most of the people we met along the way, because you strike up very deep conversations with folks very quickly, were not there for traditionally religious purposes. And this is, by the way, when we say for Christians, it's Catholic. Right. It's not even a broad swath of Christianity that has participated in pilgrimages. It's largely been a Catholic tradition. In fact, our Catholic friends, we weren't Catholic or not Catholic. Our Catholic friends are like, why are you doing this? Right. Yeah. You're more Catholic than we are because we're not doing this, but yeah, so this is really interesting about why people are doing this and what they're getting out of it. And again, for me, who we've had the privilege of traveling widely in our life, the spiritual value of travel, of encountering new people, and these, there's something about the depth of the connections that you make on the Camino that I think is just different. It's just different than meeting people on a cruise. Like I've never been on a cruise, but you know what I mean? Like it's just different. And I think it's what the world needs. quite
But
frankly.
I mean, I would also say that these are the things that you're describing that are true about the Camino de Santiago. There are just as many people that will say exactly what you're describing is what I experienced on the Appalachian Trail or on the Pacific Crest Trail. You know,
That's a good point. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like there's something about, yes, there's the destination and the relic and the veneration and all of the Catholic stuff that happens at the end of the journey. That's kind of what has been sold as like the purpose of pilgrimage for a long time, is like what's at the end of the journey.
That's a good point.
But
Yep.
what I think we're finding over, you know,
destination.
as people do this,
I mean,
is
it's the
that it's
journey.
actually the journey. It's actually the walking itself that's
Which is what it
actually
was.
healing people. Yeah.
Which is what it was for us, because we weren't there to venerate St. James.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Hmm. So for sort of the last half of the pod, I think what I want to do is go through to talk about our project, is just to ask the basic questions of like what, where, when, why, how for this, right? Before we get to that though, something that you said just sparked something in my mind. Have you seen, there was a Romanian movie that came out last year called Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World? Have you seen?
No, that's on the list. That is
Okay.
on my list. Yeah, I'm aware of it.
All right. Let me just say, like, I just watched that movie last night. Dear listener, if you're going to watch it, just be prepared. It's about 3 hours long. And there are moments in the movie where you're going to be like, what am I watching? But I found it to be, in a lot of ways, just sort of a defining Generation Z movie. In the sense that, like, it's trying to make sense of a world where people who say outrageous things on the internet are celebrities.
Got it, stop.
They were trashing my films. They were not even looking my films.
Yeah.
I shot 30 films, and they watched 2. And then I got only bad reviews for all of my films. So I said, look, guys, if you want to destroy me, I destroy you in the ring.
Yeah.
And then they came and I smashed them.
Yeah. That is history of cinema.
Yeah, but I hope my films are also, in a way, history of cinema, not only my boxing fights against the critics. But it was fun, and a lot of directors actually gratulated me to it.
Yeah.
They said, look, I really wanted to do the same, but I cannot box, so, yeah.
I saw your film, Assault on Wall Street, and sometimes I have the envy to take the gun and do the same thing with my boss, for example. Don't tell him. I also do some small movies with this filter, and I post on Instagram.
It's horrible. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you agree to make a small movie with me, please?
Okay.
Hello.
Where corporations own everything. And, it's hard to know who's selling you what, from one given moment to another, where the gig economy has basically taken healthcare away from an entire generation. It's really going into a lot of these basic concepts of what young people are sort of struggling through right now. And what I think the work of pilgrimage does is that it meets a need, like a real need that I think young people have, which is, can you give me something that's authentic, that's actually honest, that's not trying to sell me on something? Can you give me something where I can form relationships with actual people and I can feel like I belong? And can you do something where I actually experience something in the world and it's not some sort of virtual reality, it's actual physical reality? And I think that, I think honesty, relationships, and experiences are what the church has been missing for a long time, but it's actually the work of the Spirit that people want. And pilgrimage kind of does it. So
Yeah, that's really good. I'm going to have to check this film out. But that all resonates.
so good.
Yeah.
So what is our project? So basically, here's the pitch that we've actually given to our potential grant, our grant writers for the project. Ryan and I are pitching basically using this platform, using the podcast platform and also our YouTube page to create videos and audio series that explore 3 different pilgrimages from different religious traditions around the world. So the 3 that we pitched were the Camino de Santiago, which is the most popular in Spain, the Shikoku Hinro pilgrimage, which is in Shikoku, Japan, which visits 88 Buddhist temples. I think over the span of about 50 days, I think is how long that journey is. And then the Gunbrandalsladen, the trail from Oslo to Trondheim, Norway, which, sounds like another Christian trail, but actually the way that trail is set up in Norway, it's more of sort of a secular trail that has a church at the end of it, but it's more about sort of like Norway promoting hiking tourism, but using pilgrimage as a way to do it. So
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it comes at the work of pilgrimage from a non-religious standpoint, which is
And let's also talk. I mean, we can get into that, and there's probably an episode that we could devote entirely to this topic of commercialism.
Mhm.
Right. And the economics of pilgrimage, because one of the things to talk about is kind of the impact that COVID had on pilgrimage, because maybe we'll get into a little bit of this in the how, but there are along the Camino, any route of the Camino de Santiago, which there are, 3 or 5 paths that you could take. There are villages that exist only to serve pilgrims.
Mhm.
Right, as whether that's with albergues or restaurants or bars or whatever, their livelihood largely depends on pilgrims,
Mhm.
and that's been true for the history of that ritual. So when you talk about Norway, like using pilgrimage for business, that's also part of it.
It's fascinating.
Money
right?
and
Yeah.
religion have always been tied. So
Yeah.
back to your big 5 questions.
Well, so the what of it would be, this would be an audio and video series that you would be able to follow along with us. And I know you're asking, aren't there already like a bunch of video series on YouTube about pilgrimage and stuff like that? Yes, there are. As a matter of fact, we're looking to interview some of the folks that make the content creators that make those videos for you that are already up. An interesting thing, though, when it comes to the videos that at least I've been able to encounter, I've been doing a lot of research into this since we came up with this idea. There's a lot of advice about practicality. There's a lot of logistic advice. There's a lot of like where to stay, what to expect, what to carry with you, packing lists, like all of that stuff. There's really not a whole lot of series that are curious about what is this doing for people? What are they getting out of this? If this is a spiritual journey, how are they engaging in that spiritual work? And if it's not a spiritual journey, why are they doing it? Right? I think that for Ryan and I, who are already sort of curious spiritual thinkers, our point of making the series isn't to tell you how to do a pilgrimage or what to bring or anything like that. It's to really engage that question of why are you doing this? What are you looking to get out of this? How does this connect you to your faith journey?
Yeah. I second all that. I don't know what to add. I think you're right, though. That what drew me to this idea when you pitched it to me was the possibility for those conversations and those questions about, because that's what Amy and I, one of the things we found so interesting is that most people, as I said before, we're not on this for traditional or like specific religious reasons. And so any opportunity to delve deep in conversation with people across difference, whether that's, ethnic difference, racial difference, whatever, about these kinds of things is very interesting to me. And these journeys are just ripe with those opportunities. So yeah, I don't have anything to add to the what of it, because that's, that's a video and audio podcast, that I think to your point will dig deeper than some of the logistical work that's been done, which is also very helpful,
And I think our goal is to create a resource for people who would like to do education around pilgrimage, but can't one, afford to go on pilgrimage themselves, or two, aren't physically able to go on pilgrimage, this would be a resource where you're basically shoulder to shoulder with us while we're doing this trail, and we can package that in a way that you can use that in your churches or in your discussion groups or something like that to have those bigger conversations about what we talked about before. So
Yeah.
so where are we going? Like I said, we currently have this scheduled as sort of a 3-year series. Now, whether or not we start this year, I don't know. We're already kind of like, we would be up against it as far as like organizing an international trip in the span of like 5 months, 6 months. Like that would be hard to kind of get off the ground. I think what you're going to see with this series is that this first year is going to be laying a lot of groundwork as to like what we want to do and why we want to do it and how we're going to do it. But the idea would be that we would do one journey a year for 3 years, probably starting in 2026, and learn about different cultures and different ways that people do this work, I guess.
You know, there's an outside chance we could start this year, like, or take a trip this year. But yeah, I think the more foundation work we do, I think the richer our conversations will be on the way, as they say.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of interviews and book recommendations and film recommendations and YouTube recommendations. Yeah.
When are we going? So that's like I just said, over the course of 3 years, doing a different journey each year, and probably packaging, you know, every year that we do a journey, like our focus for that entire year will be on that particular trail. So if we start with the Camino, which is likely, right, because that's the one it's the oldest, it's the one that has the most infrastructure built in, and it's the most
granddaddy.
popular. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's like the Rose Bowl of pilgrimages.
That's right. That's right. As a matter of fact, hang on, Ryan. Let me pull up my stats really quickly because I love to cite them like over and over again. The Camino de Santiago, which has, you know, we keep saying that it's like a big overall heading. The Camino de Santiago isn't just the one trail that goes from Spain. There's actually lots of, if you think of it as like a nervous system, there's kind of like a lot of nerves that all go to like one hub, right?
Yeah.
Which is Santiago de
Tributaries. Yeah.
Yeah. So, or like rivers. There's a lot of rivers that flow to like this one place. If you complete a journey on the Camino, you receive a certificate, which is called a Compostela.
We're not doing video on this one, but I've got mine.
Yeah.
We've got it hanging up in our, like the entrance to our house.
I've got my three.
Ooh, 3.
So the Compostela is basically proof that you've completed your pilgrimage. In 2003, the Pilgrim Office in Santiago gave out 74,324 Compostelas. In 2013, that number had gone up to 215,879 Compostelas given out.
Wow.
And then, even after the pandemic in 2020 basically shut down pilgrimage over the course of a year to a year and a half in Spain, in 2023, the Pilgrim Office gave out 446,078 Compostelas.
Wow.
So, yeah, when we say that the Camino de Santiago is really where it starts and really for a lot of people where it ends, like that's why we're saying this is a big deal, because this is the one that a lot of people think of when they think of the idea of pilgrimage.
I really hope you shared those stats in your grant proposal.
I did.
Good. You understood the assignment. Yeah, it's really remarkable. And I don't think it's going to stop. I don't think that trend's going to reverse anytime soon. And I want to lift out, you know, something you said, which is the authenticity part. I mean, this is the real deal, and it's a big commitment. And and to get to interrogate the why, which is another one of these big questions, which we really can't get into now. We can talk about the why of our first pilgrimages, but that there's going to be so many awesome and interesting reasons behind the growth in that and why people are participating. So yeah, those are really interesting figures.
Yeah. So how are we doing this? Well, we've talked a little bit about grant funding already. So going back, I pitched this idea to Ryan going back to last year. I kind of felt this call that like our podcast, Popping Collars, is great. We've been doing this for 10 years, but we could probably do more. And I saw this as like an amazing opportunity for us to use a platform that we've built and grown and we've seen real success in to kind of go into the world a little bit and sort of explore, not just pop culture and religion, but like how people are making meaning out of their journeys to like visit these cultures and stuff like that. And so I had the idea of a travel series, and pilgrimage just kind of fits right in with that idea of like travel and stuff. But travel is not cheap. I mean, it's not cheap to fly around the world. Like, even though, your life as a pilgrim is lived in moderation, like you stay in hostels and you carry everything that you need on your back. You still have to eat, you still have to sleep, you still have to get to where you're going, and you still have to get back home. And for Ryan and I, we're looking to record this journey. So we're looking to get film equipment. We're looking to get audio equipment, portable equipment that we can take with us, maybe even drone footage that we can like send up and show landscapes of like where we are and stuff like that. So all of these things sort of come at a price. We've applied for grants to help us with that funding, with the idea that we were hoping that by now we would know whether or not we got that funding. We don't know as of the time of this recording. What I can tell you is that if we haven't received funding, or at least communication from the grants themselves, by the next time you hear us, that you'll probably also hear us talking a lot more about like a GoFundMe page or some kind of crowdsourcing that can help us. It's not a huge number that we're looking to get to, but there is a number that we have to hit in order to make it happen. So that's the project, sort of in a nutshell. 3 pilgrimages, recorded, blogged, vlogged.
Interrogated.
Yeah. Lots of interviews, lots of different, unpacking this idea of pilgrimage and why people do it. And doing that over the course of 3 years across 3 different spiritual traditions.
I don't know. I feel like it's good work, and I feel like it's timely. And these are acts and practices that bring people together across difference. And I want my life to be about that. So this project is like right in that vein. So I'm excited about the possibilities and the conversations. There's some really, we've already, before we started recording today, some really cool conversation partners to connect with and reconnect with. So
Ryan, to wrap us up, we're looking at this journey, we're looking at this project. We don't know what the future holds, but one of the things that I liked to do when I was doing my Camino, and I was, especially the times where I felt really discouraged and I had blisters and I was sore and I was walking by myself in the middle of nowhere and I kept tripping over giant rocks, like, and picking them up and throwing them because they kept getting in my way on the trail. I like to picture myself at the end of the journey thinking back to like, what would my future self tell me to keep me going during these moments where I didn't know what to expect. So future Ryan from 5 years from now, what is he going to be telling these 2 idiots having this conversation right now?
You had no idea. You had no idea. And hopefully what a ride. Like, I mean, even better than we could have imagined. Yeah. And there's always a beer at the end of the day.
I love it.
And you need less than you think you do.
Future Greg is going to be looking back at this moment and saying, you got to enjoy every part of it, even the parts that you hate, even the parts where you're discouraged and you haven't gotten any funding and you don't know, even the parts where you fail. Like, you've got to embrace it all. Like, even the failure is important. And so
maybe more important if you approach it with the right mentality. of what am I going to learn from this and how we're going to grow.
So welcome to the journey. Welcome to the trail. We are going to keep going, and we're going to start reaching out to folks. And next time you hear us, it's likely going to be an interview. We're likely going to be picking the brains of other people who have entered into the space of doing digital content around pilgrimage. But you're on the journey at this point. You started the pilgrimage with us. So congratulations. Grab what you're going to need, and we'll see you down the trail.
Cheers.
Song about a single